Today, we are undertaking a deep dive into a pretty devastating zoonotic threat, the Nipah virus, or Nevi.
Maybe.
And if you haven't heard much about it, you really need to grasp this one fact from its history.
Not quite a stark one.
Right. When it first properly emerged, the outbreak required this incredibly drastic measure. Authorities had to order the culling of nearly 1 million animals.
1 million pigs,
Yeah.
specifically, just to try and get a handle on it.
Exactly. So our mission today is to give you the core facts. Where it comes from, how it spreads, and crucially, what the preventative measures actually are.
And starting with the basics is key. Nipah is zoonotic. That means it's a virus that naturally jumps from animals to humans.
And the animal source?
The primary natural host, the reservoir, is the fruit bat. You might know them as flying foxes.
Flying foxes, right. And the name, Nipah, it actually tells you something about its origins.
It does. It's named after the village Sungai Nipah in Malaysia. That's where it was first identified back in 1998, 1999.
But it didn't stay localized for long, did it?
No, definitely not. That initial outbreak spread into Singapore as well.
And the impact was significant.
Absolutely. The U.S. CDC figures mention around 300 people infected, and tragically, about 100 deaths resulted from that first major event.
Which brings us back to the pigs. Why were they so central to that first outbreak? They weren't the original source.
The bats were. But the virus jumped from bats into these pig populations on farms. And pigs acted as what we call an amplifying host. They got infected, replicated the virus very efficiently, and then shed large amounts of it.
Making it much easier to spread to the humans working closely with them.
Precisely. And that amplification is what likely led to the scale of the human outbreak, and ultimately that drastic decision to cull nearly 1 million pigs. It was seen as the only way to break the cycle.
A really extreme measure, but it shows how seriously they took the threat, even then.
Right from the beginning.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit more then. If flying foxes are the main reservoir, how does the virus actually make that jump? From bats, potentially other animals, to us?
Well, there are a few main routes we need to consider.
Go on.
First, there's direct, close contact with infected animals. We mentioned pigs, but it could also be horses, dogs, or even the bats themselves if handled improperly.
Okay, direct contact. What else?
The second route is really interesting, tied specifically to the bat's behavior. It involves ingestion.
Ingestion. You mean eating something contaminated?
Exactly. Like handling or eating fruit that's fallen from trees, fruit the bats might have nibbled on or contaminated with urine or saliva.
Okay, fallen fruit. That makes sense.
But perhaps the most sort of notorious pathway, especially in regions where Nipah is endemic, is consuming raw date palm sap.
Raw date palm sap. How does that get contaminated?
Well, the bats are attracted to the sap collection pots, often placed overnight. They might feed near them or directly from them, contaminating the sap with their secretions.
Wow. That's incredibly specific. And as you said, it raises real challenges for public health, doesn't it? If drinking raw sap is a traditional practice.
It's a huge challenge. You're asking communities to change long-standing habits, things tied to their culture, or even livelihood. It's not simple.
So animal contact, contaminated fruit, raw date, palm sap. But then there's the human element, too. It doesn't just stop at the animal-to-human jump, right?
No, and that's critical. Human-to-human transmission does occur.
How easily?
It generally requires close contact with an infected person. Think exposure to their bodily fluids, saliva, respiratory droplets, urine.
Which makes healthcare settings a real point of concern.
Definitely. Hospitals need extremely strict infection control, especially when dealing with patients showing respiratory or neurological symptoms. Without that, caregivers, other patients, they're all at risk.
So the knowledge of these risks, like the raw sap or handling fallen fruit, really hammers home that awareness needs to extend into everyday life in affected areas. It's not just a farm issue.
Not at all. It's about daily choices.
Okay, now this is where it gets particularly concerning, the disease itself. The range of symptoms seems huge, from almost nothing to, well, fatal. What does a Navi infection actually look like?
It's incredibly varied. You can have very mild, almost non-specific symptoms initially. Things like fever, headache, muscle aches, myalgia, maybe some vomiting or a sore throat, dizziness, drowsiness too.
So easily mistaken for flu or something else common?
Very easily, yes. But then it can escalate. Respiratory problems are common.
Like trouble breathing?
Yes, difficulty breathing, a really persistent cough. It can develop into acute respiratory infection, sometimes mild, sometimes very severe, leading to acute respiratory distress syndrome.
But the most feared aspect of Nipah is its attack on the brain, isn't it? The neurological side.
That's right. Severe cases often involve encephalitis.
Which is essentially inflammation of the brain.
Exactly. The virus directly affects the central nervous system. This leads to neurological issues, disorientation, confusion, drowsiness, and it can progress to seizures.
And the speed. Our sources highlighted just how fast this decline can be.
Terrifyingly fast. In those severe neurological cases, a coma can develop incredibly rapidly. We're talking sometimes within 24 to 48 hours after the severe symptoms start.
24 to 48 hours, that's an incredibly narrow window for any kind of intervention.
It is, especially if you're not near advanced medical care. And that rapid progression contributes to the very high fatality rate associated with Nipah.
Which can be over 70% in some outbreaks.
Yes, estimates are often in that range, 40 to 75%, sometimes higher, depending on the outbreak and access to care.
And adding to the danger, there's no vaccine for humans yet, is there? And treatment.
No approved human vaccine currently. Treatment is largely supportive care managing symptoms, providing respiratory support if needed. There aren't specific proven antiviral drugs that can effectively stop the virus once severe disease sets in.
So prevention isn't just the best strategy.
It's pretty much the only strategy we have right now.
Right. So let's pivot squarely to that. Prevention. What are the absolute must-do actions, the concrete steps people need to take?
Okay, number one, basic hygiene, but rigorously applied. Hand washing. Soap and water. Frequently and thoroughly, especially after any contact with animals or with someone who might be infected or their environment.
Makes sense. Critical first step.
Second, that dietary point again. Strictly avoid consuming raw date palm juice or sap in areas where Nipah is known to occur.
That seems like a really high-impact, specific action for those regions.
It absolutely is. Then, if someone is infected in a household,
precautions become even more vital within the home, right?
Yes. Shared items need careful management. Things like toiletries, clothes, even communal buckets or mugs used for washing or drinking, they need to be kept separate and cleaned meticulously to avoid spreading the virus within the family.
Good point. And going back to the fruit and the bats?
Food safety is key. Always wash fruits thoroughly before you eat them. That's standard good practice anyway.
But specifically for Nipah?
The big one is, do not eat fruit that's fallen on the ground or any fruit that looks like it's been partially eaten or damaged potentially by a bat. Just leave it.
Avoid the risk entirely. Makes sense. Now, our sources also included specific advice from medical experts on things like masks and meat. What about masks?
Yeah, that's interesting. The advice wasn't necessarily mandatory masks for everyone, always, but they were highly recommended.
Why is that?
Well, the expert pointed out it's sort of dual protection. A mask can reduce the risk of inhaling respiratory droplets if you're in close contact with someone shedding the Nipah virus.
Okay.
But it also protects against other things circulating, like common flu viruses. So it's seen as a generally good public health measure, beneficial for both the individual and the community.
Right, a sensible precaution. And the meat question. People worry about eating pork, for instance, given the history.
A very understandable concern. The expert view cited was that assuming there aren't active cases being reported in local livestock.
Which is a key assumption.
A very key assumption, yes. Then eating meat, like pork, is considered safe if, and this is the crucial part, if it is cooked thoroughly.
Thorough cooking again. Seems basic, but essential.
It is. High temperatures kill the virus. So proper cooking effectively neutralizes any potential risk that might, hypothetically, be in the meat tissue.
Good to clarify. And finally, perhaps the most sensitive area, handling fatalities.
Yes, this is extremely important and requires immense care. Public health guidelines for handling the bodies of those who died from Nipah must be followed with absolute stringency.
Because the risk of transmission continues even after death.
Absolutely. Bodily fluids remain infectious. Any carelessness during funeral preparations, burial, or associated cleaning rituals could easily lead to more infections. It could trigger a whole new cluster of cases if not managed properly.
A sobering reminder of how infectious this can be. Okay, so let's try and synthesize all this. What's the big picture?
Well, we've established Nipah is a serious, often deadly zoonotic disease. Its natural home is the fruit bat.
It spreads through some quite specific, sometimes subtle ways that contaminated raw date palm sap, the fallen fruit.
And potentially through close contact with infected animals or people.
And once it infects humans, the potential for rapid neurological decline and a high fatality rate makes it incredibly dangerous, especially with no specific cure or vaccine yet.
Which brings us back to that initial outbreak and the pigs. That event, needing the cull of nearly 1 million animals, happened because the virus found an amplifying host. It jumped from bats to pigs, exploded in that population, and then spilled over much more easily to humans.
Right.
So the provocative thought, the question maybe to leave you with is this. We know the virus can jump between species, bats to pigs, bats to horses, bats to dogs, bats to humans, and then human to human.
A versatile virus.
Very. And we know the initial trigger for human infection could be something incredibly simple, almost mundane, like picking up a piece of fruit from the ground or having a traditional drink. So given that simplicity at the start, and the virus's ability to find new hosts where it can amplify, how ready are we really? How effective can our surveillance and control measures be at catching these subtle jumps, these small risks, before they potentially find the next amplifying host and lead to something much, much bigger?
That leap from a contaminated piece of fruit to a potential large-scale event, that's the challenge, isn't it? Managing that complex chain of risks.
Exactly. It's about spotting and stopping the small sparks to prevent the huge fire. That's the core challenge in managing these zoonotic threats.